Good morning, everyone. I'm just waiting for all the attendees to log in once I've started broadcasting. So I'll wait a few more seconds before starting. Okay, I'm going to start with a welcome from a very freezing and icy Joburg, where winter has definitely set in. I'd like to welcome you all to Trialogue's third webinar. And before we start, I just want to go through a few technical things. So we're obviously using the Zoom platform. We've disabled the chat functionality, but the Q&A functionality is there. If you can't see it, just hover your mouse usually over the bottom or the top of your screen. We would encourage you to ask questions throughout by typing them into that Q&A section. Please do make your questions short so I can look through them all when we move to the Q&A part of the day. And also, can you please direct them at one of the panelists? We will be running a few polls as well, where you'll be able to vote on the screen. Also to say that there will be a survey after this webinar. You'll have the opportunity to either complete it today, directly after the session, or we'll send out another link tomorrow. And I'd like to encourage you to complete that because it really helps us in setting these up and in changing the format around. And it also helps us in deciding what topics to do next. So we've had some good feedback from the previous ones, and hence we're continuing them, and we're taking guidance on the topics from those surveys. And lastly, just to say that the session is being recorded, and the recording of the session, as well as all of the slides, as well as the write-up of the session, will be available on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub after the session. Okay, so to start, there's a lot of names I do recognize on the registration, but also many I don't. So I wanted to start with a very brief overview of who Trialogue is. We are a research and advisory company focused purely on responsible business. So our tagline is supporting better business. And we do this through two main ways. The first is consulting services, and the second is through sharing knowledge. On the consulting side, we assist companies with their corporate social investment and sustainability strategies. And at the moment we have a new service around kind of strategy refresh, given that a lot of CSI departments and foundations are looking at how to change their strategies during this pandemic. We also do a lot of monitoring and evaluation work and have built up our team so can assist you with reviewing your programs. On the knowledge sharing platforms, we have our annual Trialogue Business and Society Conference that was due to take place in April, but has been shifted to the 13th and 14th of October. We are doing a purely virtual event, and I would encourage you all to diarize those dates because we are looking at exciting ways of we've got a great program lineup and exciting ways of networking and getting more involved in an online virtual environment. We also have the Trialogue Business and Society Handbook, which was previously known as the CSI Handbook. We're currently underway with the research for that. So we survey corporates and nonprofits every year. So for those corporates and nonprofits in the audience, please do complete our questionnaires. It really helps the sector to find out what's going on. And if you'd like more information, you can contact us on that. And then the third platform I'd like to highlight is our Trialogue Knowledge Hub. This is an online portal of freely available information in numerous different development sectors. It contains case studies, research, lead practice and guidelines in the different sectors. At this point, I'd like to thank Kagiso Trust for supporting the topic on the Knowledge Hub, for sponsoring the topic capacity building at local municipalities, which will obviously be our focus for today. And all of the outputs from today will be loaded onto that topic. I'm also very pleased that we have Paul Smith here from Kagiso Trust. So thank you to Kagiso for that. Also to say that on the Knowledge Hub, we recently launched a new topic, which is the business response to COVID-19. Again, a lot of nice case studies on there. And if you are looking at how your business can and should be responding and thinking about the longer term, it's worth visiting the Knowledge Hub for that. Okay. moving on to the agenda, and just while I'm going through it, I want to share the first poll, which just to get a sense of who's in the audience and how many of you are actually working with or supporting local government. So I think it's in front of you now, and I'll just go through the agenda while you're responding. It's just asking whether you currently work with or support local government. So I'm going to do a brief overview, and this is going to be followed by 2 case studies. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us to share their experiences. We have Paul Smith from Kagiso Trust and John Lomberg from Santam, both of which are organizations that work with, that support local municipalities in different ways. So this will hopefully take between 20 and 30 minutes, and then the rest of the session will be focused on Q&A. Okay, I think everyone's voted, so I'm going to end the polling, and you should be able to see the results. So yeah, fairly even spread, but most people saying that they're working with local government on the implementation of projects. Fewer saying that they're actually supporting local government, and that's something that we will be focusing on today. And a third of our audience saying they don't currently work with or support local government. So maybe are interested in doing that in the future, and that's why you're joining us today. Okay, so why are we looking at this topic? I mean, local government is obviously vital for service delivery. And I think now in this period, when we're in a national state of disaster, there is big responsibilities put onto municipalities for service delivery, and the municipal managers have a lot of power in terms of decision making during disasters. A particular area which there's been a lot of focus on in the media is the responsibility of municipalities to deliver or to provide access to clean water and sanitation during this pandemic. So, are they up to it, and how can companies respond? And I think that's what we want to look at today. If we look at the broader picture, corporate social investment is a relatively small contributor. So at Trialogue, we estimate that last year in 2019, total corporate social investment was 10.2 billion. Now this sounds like a lot, but if you compare it to government expenditure, it's small. So how can we leverage that expenditure? And one of the ways we can do that is by working with or supporting government, where the majority of social expenditure and social responsibility lies. So there's numerous ways to do this. One is through trying to influence policies through advocacy or research or piloting programs. And another is through working with government. And we saw that the biggest portion of the audience do actually work with government, either on implementing programs, match funding for programs, aligning their programs to government policies, etc. So that's another way. And then the third way is to actually support the kind of capacity building at various government levels. And this is obviously the focus of our session today. So just in terms of context, I'm sure all of you are aware that for a number of decades now, actually, South African municipalities have been facing severe service delivery challenges. In fact, we saw last year that there were 218 service delivery protests, which was slightly down, but this number has increased over the years. There's been a number of reasons given for this, including poor financial management, lack of capacity, overburdened infrastructure, and weak governance. The most recent auditor-general's report was launched last year, and it pertained to the 2017-18 year, the financial audit of municipalities. And unfortunately, it found that the situation had actually deteriorated since the previous audit. And it found that irregular and wasteful expenditure at municipalities reached 122 billion. So if you recall, I just said a few minutes ago that total corporate social investment expenditure is 10.2 billion. And then we look at this figure of irregular and wasteful expenditure at 122 billion. It's quite startling. And I think also the finding that only 18 out of the 257 audited municipalities produced compliance statements. and that 65% of the performance reports were dubious and close to unusable. Were really shocking findings that, yeah, just to, I guess, point to why there is such an issue with service delivery. So I don't think this is an area yet that many corporates fund, but let me just get you back to the next slide. We've just put here some broad ways that we think that companies can support local municipalities. Obviously, there's other ways. Just to say that there's more information and case studies associated with each of these on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub. So if you do want to dig a bit deeper after the session, I would encourage you to visit that. But companies or donors can support planning processes. This can include actual development of plans, but also community and citizen and other stakeholder engagement processes. They can also invest in human capacity, and there's a number of case studies on the Hub where companies are providing training or mentorship or secondment programs to support the local municipalities. They can also build and maintain infrastructure. And then I think there's a lot of companies, on the last point, supporting municipalities in particular area. We have Santam today who support municipalities with risk management, disaster preparedness and relief. There's other case studies on the Knowledge Hub of companies supporting particular municipalities with early childhood development or other specific topics. Okay, so I'm going to launch the second poll now. Let me go to the next one. And this one asks, given these categories that I've just spoken through, which type of support of local government do you think is most effective? So supporting the planning processes, investing in human capacity, building and maintaining infrastructure, or supporting municipalities in particular areas. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to respond. I'll leave that on as I go down to the next slide. And on this slide, we've just got some general guidelines for companies and donors considering supporting local municipalities. So the first one there is really around determining the root causes of the issue or the lack of capacity, rather than just focusing on the symptoms or the lack of service delivery. The other, and this is something we say in all of our sessions, is to ensure that the program is aligned with your business. I think we've got a very good example here with Santam, where they're obviously specialists as an insurance company in risk management. And this is the area that they are working with municipalities on. So, you know, if you're a financial services organization, how can you help with financial management and financial controls, etc.? So important to think of how you can align your program with your business. The other is to look at improving capacity by supporting the skills transfer. We've spoken through a few ways of doing that. The other is around developing partnerships. Obviously, this issue is national, widespread. There's many municipalities, and even within a municipality, you know, how can you engage different stakeholders in order to try and address some of the issues at the municipality? And the last one is, again, something that we always say, which is around sharing lessons. And that's what we're planning to do with the case studies today. So I'm just going to end that poll. I think most of you have voted. And I'm going to share those results. And we see that the biggest, most people, well, 40% of our participants think that investing in human capacity at municipalities is the most effective way of supporting them. And I think we will hear some examples of that from Paul. And this is followed by supporting municipalities in a particular area, and we'll hear some of that from John. So thank you for responding to those polls. We're going to move on now to the case studies. I'm going to first hand over to Paul Smith from Kagiso Trust to share their experience. Paul, thank you for joining us. I would like you to start by please just briefly describing the support that you have been providing to the Makana Municipality in the Eastern Cape, and also to touch on how the support has shifted during COVID-19.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. Just to start off with, I just want to talk about Kagiso Trust and our role in development. Kagiso Trust's vision is a prosperous, peaceful, and equitable and just society for all. And and based on that vision, we have four sort of key pillars that we focus on: education, socio-economic development, capacity building, which includes civil society strengthening and local government support, and then also our own financial sustainability, as we're pretty much a self-funded NGO, and that is managed by Kagiso Capital. We also, just as an understanding, we also set out to develop models. Our budgets are limited, and we can't do the work of government. So we set out to develop models that are innovative, scalable, replicable, sustainable, unique, and effective. And so all projects and programs that we implement are focused to achieve that particular outcome. The Makana support project was an interesting start because it was really implemented through a tender process through National Department of Cooperative Governance, and where we were contracted to support 10 municipalities. The support was pretty much around revenue management issues, revenue collection, data quality, and debt management. And it was about transferring skills and building capacity. And I think that's been a trend for many years, that type of support has been provided to municipalities. And it really brings me to a point of how we should think about maybe contracting differently in terms of supporting municipalities, and really spend a little more time on the co-creation of solutions, and maybe less emphasis placed on issues-based support, and drilling down to the real core issues that affect the performance of municipalities. And because one size doesn't fit all. And I think before we even start thinking about capacity building in the municipal environment, and we've learned this lesson through our education work in the schools, is we need to make sure people are open and receptive to training, and have a different mindset towards how they execute their work on a daily basis. And it's only once people have this attitude change and regard themselves as critical and important in the work environment, can change really take place, and upskilling can take place as well. It was during that same year, in sort of 2018, that the Kagiso board and the management, the EXCO, approached KTC and wanted us to sort of reimagine our support for local government, and try and think of ways of expanding our support to include direct impact on marginalized communities. Because the work with local government in isolation was having some impact, and whether that was filtering through to communities was debatable. So we went away and reconceptualized the local government support, and we included 3 new elements over and above the revenue management, which was to look at indigent management, and those are the people, the poorest of the poor, and that the people that need the most social support. And the second one was local economic development, and the intention there was to try and link the people who need the most support to the LED strategy, to make sure that we can maybe create more employment in the different municipalities. And the third thing was really community engagement, and this was more focused on trying to engage more members of civil society and institutions that are based in municipalities to help, because we understand that the role of the municipality in development is limited, and in many cases they are an enabler of development and not responsible for the development itself. And the enabler element is providing services and making sure that the towns and cities function properly, and that people have a platform in which to launch their own initiatives and economic opportunities. But the revenue management work also highlighted that the municipal tax base is on a steady decline, And if the municipalities don't focus on local economic development and job creation, we in time will find that a small percentage of community are funding the entire requirements of other communities that aren't employed and don't earn and can't contribute to the economy. So our focus on indigent and local economic development was twofold. Once was for social economic development in the different regions, and secondly to in the medium term and long term assist municipalities in focusing and increasing their tax base so they have sufficient funding. But also during this process, we also realized that the skills and resources in municipalities is limited. And at no point was Makana drawing on the resources and the capacity of the community to make a difference for everyone. And so that sort of triggered our change in focus. So in 2019, we approached the municipality with this new model, a new approach, and the municipality signed up in 2019 and was quite open to it. And I suppose what sort of attracted us to Makana, and why Makana, because we had 10 municipalities to choose from. This was that Makana, which is the former Grahamstown area, had quite a unique economy, and it really needed to be a functional town to continue to attract the people that were being attracted by the education economy and the festival type economy. And so, and that was quite unique from many towns. And the municipality had also recently appointed new management, a new CFO, a new mayor, and a new municipal manager. And for the 5 years prior to that, they had acting and administrators, which really didn't allow for any sort of consistency or continuity in terms of planning and execution. And this affected the morale of the municipality and also the functional performance. The town also had a very active, but to say the least, disjointed civil society. And in investigating a little further, many referred to it as the circular firing squad. People all wanted a better town and a better functional town, but no one could really agree on how that should be achieved. But nevertheless, that energy was something unique and important for us, as if we could focus this in the right direction, I think great things could be achieved. The town also had a significant amount of intellectual capacity. Being an education economy, there are many people that could assist in building the skills of the municipality and building the economy and working on some of the infrastructure deficits and service delivery problems that they currently experience. And so this was, Makana also demonstrated the typical apartheid geography that we see in many of our small towns, where there's a reasonably prosperous element of town, and then another element of town that wasn't as prosperous, where a lot of unemployment, and unemployment in the region is somewhere in the vicinity of 50%. And for this town to remain a sought after venue for education and for the festivals it currently hosts, this needed to be addressed. Because the future of the town really depended on the prosperity of all its citizens and not just a small sector of the town. So our new approach, hypothesis, really sort of reads as follows. You know, if all relevant local stakeholders collaborate, that's community, business, and government, and act, then the local collective ownership of issues and interventions will improve the prospect of positive change. Thus, relevant integration, impactful programs, and that are co-created by local stakeholders, providing a better prospect of sustainable impact, and so that local communities can prosper and poverty can be alleviated. And that's really the hypothesis we're working around on taking this project forward. Just to look at the different complexities, is one of the things we had to sort of work on initially is building social cohesion and stakeholder cohesion in the environment. And this is no easy task. And it really means setting up and engaging relatively complex systems in order to move forward. So we spent significant time working with stakeholders, because we had to also prepare communities to work together to get to a common point of being ready to engage the municipality in a constructive way. And we have to work with the municipality and preparing them to engage community in a constructive way. And it was only once we sort of reach, and we're starting to reach that point at the moment where the Makana Circle of Unity has been created, and this Circle of Unity is really a stakeholder forum that includes government and non-government and independents, where people come together that are like-minded and interested in the future of the town and can bring some skills to the table and fixing some of the issues that are on the ground. And whilst we are doing this, we also engaged the municipality around an LED strategy, which was last reviewed in 2009. And we held a series of workshops to develop the strategy and invited some of the stakeholders in to present their perspectives so that we could start building this cohesive strategy going forward, because it was no longer going to be a Makana strategy, it was going to be a strategy for all and for the region. And that was really important. I'm not sure how I'm going with
Thanks,
time.
You're out of time for the opener. But,
okay, thank you. I'll stop there then. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting case study, how you moved from a focus on revenue management to a much broader focus on kind of community engagement, stakeholder engagement, and with the aim of local economic development. And I think in the question session, we can get into some of the more details on how you did that and some of the challenges. So thank you. I do see there's a lot of questions coming through. If I can ask you please to keep them succinct. There's some really long ones which are going to be tough for me to get through. And there's a lot of questions around the presentation. If you missed the beginning, the presentation and the recording and the write-up will all be available on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub after the session. Okay, so keep the questions coming. Please direct them at one of the panelists. And after John has done his opening statement, we'll move to the questions. So I'd like to now thank John for joining us. John's from Santam, and he's program manager of their local municipality disaster preparedness program. John, you are still on mute. If you want to unmute yourself, I'll hand over to you. And if you can just tell us a little bit about the support that Santam has been providing to municipalities, and also touch on, obviously, you've been looking squarely at the disaster preparedness part of municipalities. And here we are in a national state of disaster. So have the municipalities that you have been working with over the last years, have they fared better during this period? Or have you seen different results? Over to you, John.
Thank you. Good morning, Kathy, and good morning, everybody. As Santam, we looked at our role in society and we asked ourselves, are we an insurance company? And we begin to critically look at that answer and say, look, we're not just an insurance company, we should be providing something more than insurance. And that becomes part of our DNA and our tagline. We want to provide more than insurance and thereby ensure that we are relevant in society. In fact, one of the two key things that we set ourselves to do as the executive team, it is to build a resilient society, because we are a risk carrier and it's very much aligned with our core business, which is risk. So how do we apply our knowledge base, our expertise to build a resilient society? So that is one of our key strategic imperatives that we're driving. And then, of course, to reduce the risk protection gap, meaning we want to ensure that we focus on reducing risk whilst we bring more and more people into the insurance net, and thereby reducing the risk protection gap. So our work is based on those two fundamental principles, to build a resilient society and to close the risk protection gap. So we started this journey about 10 years ago, where we adopted 5 municipalities, and I'm sure many in the audience will remember the Business Adopt a Municipality initiative, BAM, that government invited business to say, local government is everyone's business, play your part. So we said, let's put our toe in the water, because there are challenges, obviously, where business does not always know how government operates. So we didn't want to overcommit, but learn in the process. So we started with 5 municipalities, And then over time, for the last while now, we've grown from 5 to 53 municipalities that we're supporting now since 2010 when we started. And of course, there's been a lot of learnings that we've gleaned. And out of those learnings, we created something called a best practice to enable other businesses, other organized businesses, not to make the same mistakes that we made, to appreciate protocol, not to come in with a paternalistic approach, but as Paul indicated, to co-create solutions. And so our focus has primarily been, as you rightly said, Kathy, on risk management. Because we are a risk carrier, we are a risk underwriter, we understand risk very well. And we also seen that many municipalities, because of a lack of resources and the various challenges that we've seen in your opening slide, they don't have the capacity or resources to provide these requisite services to their communities. So, and with our 2 or 3 primary focuses around risk management has been, let's build capacity in municipalities around fire risk management. 2, let's also assist them on drought and flooding risk by providing them something we call GIS, Geographic Information Systems, so that they can have data, and through that data inform them how to understand the risk on the ground and how to make proactive decisions to reduce loss of life and assets to their community and societies. But there's benefit to Santam as well, because if municipalities do apply the information, the data, the knowledge, it also reduces our risk exposure, so that there's been that shared value that we started to see coming through. You asked the question, if we've seen benefits? Yes, we have, because if you track the various insurance losses that the insurance industry has been exposed to, and in Santam in particular, there's one key example of that of St. Francis, where in 2012, 400 million lost the insurance industry, 2012, 2015, after our intervention, 200 million, 2017, 18 million. Now, it's only through having had such interventions that we can see the risk reducing over time. So we are very excited to see the processes and principles and work that we put in provide a dividend at the end of the day, both to the municipality and for business. And we've also seen a remarkable reduction in loss of life in those municipalities. And it's mostly the most vulnerable that gets affected. So we also saw an opportunity there, and we said, from a risk management point of view, yes, we can build capacity in the municipality, train the GIS practitioners to make use of data, to make proactive decisions and reduce loss of life. We provide firefighters with the fire brigades with all the requisite equipment, protective gear and those related things. But what about the most vulnerable? What about those in informal settlements? So there we've seen mostly people as live are devastated because of fire in these informal settlements, especially now during winter. And what we've done, we've embarked on a program of installing smoke detectors in informal settlements. And we've seen a huge benefit in that regard. And there's a lot of stories that we've collected over time about the efficacy and benefit of these smoke detectors, because now that smoke detector serves as an early warning system, warning not just the people within their home, but also the surrounding communities about that there's potential fire, and they can respond jointly to reduce the exposure to the families. And we've seen many lives in that way being saved. And so that has primarily been our focus for the last 10 years. But now with the advent of COVID, what now? Do we stick to risk management or disaster management? We had to be responsive and adaptable and nimble enough. And we see this pandemic as a critical issue of intervention for us. So we started to say, at national level, what are the biggest challenges? At provincial level, and at district level. So we have structured our support program around those 3 tiers of government. So at national level, we engage with National Disaster Management Center, and we determined what are their biggest challenges. And they have officials that are on the front line that must go to hotspots and identify the landscape and advise, and they themselves were exposed. So we started to provide PPEs and resources to those ones that has been designated to do this work on behalf of national government. The second, and of course, our key partner is the Red Cross Society of South Africa. I mean, they've got they've got thousands of volunteers out there, and we see they themselves normally are mostly exposed to over 6,000 volunteers and 4,000 staff. And we provided them with the requisite PPEs and hygiene and sanitize and so on to enable them as a front line to assist them. And then, of course, at provincial level, we are tracking where the epicenters of the pandemic, and we're now engaging with the provincial government to say, what is your biggest pain points? What are your biggest challenges? And we provide resources in that regard now as well. We started with the Western Cape. We've engaged with the Minister Bradell and his team, and they shared with us what their challenges are. We've engaged with the Eastern Cape. We're now going to KZN as well as Gauteng. So that is our program at provincial level. We also ask ourselves, who are the most impacted around this pandemic? And we know that the medical professionals and the nurses are mostly affected. So we have rolled out something called video laryngoscopes to enable doctors who tend to patients not to have too much proximity, not to be too much close proximity to those who are infected, and be able to still administer a process of checking whether the person is in fact infected with the virus, but being able to see this on the video rather than to be physically close to the individual. So those video laryngoscopes we roll out to all hospitals in South Africa. And then, of course, at provincial level as well, we've seen the firefighters themselves, they needed to, because they're on the front line, they needed also to have testing done for themselves. So infrared thermometers as well for them, so that they are also, to some extent, a little bit insulated from this risk. So these are the various things, Kathy, where we, until before COVID, we were looking at building resilience around disasters, fires, floods, drought, to be in line with what we currently challenged with, which is the pandemic. And that is how we have adjusted our focus for now. We probably will go back because our target is to continue building resilience in all 257 municipalities. Our target 2025 is 100, but we're also bringing in other partners. I think our success will be informed by collaboration and partnering with others, multi-sectorial and multidisciplinary partners, to bring different skills to bear. I'm so excited to see the polls. And there is a platform for us working across those functional areas, bring all our expertise to bear for us to build resilient societies. That's a mouthful, but maybe I must rest here.
No, thank you so much, John. That's such an interesting mouthful. I think, you know, your case study has always been a great one for shared value, you know, work that you're doing aligned to your business, creating value. I hadn't heard your St. Francis outcomes, and it really shows how the work that you're doing has had a good impact. I also wasn't aware of how you've kind of adjusted your programs. And it sounds like it makes such sense that you're working with your existing partners, both within the government at the various levels, but also the Red Cross, who you work with on your other program, and now helping them in addressing the pandemic. So thank you. Okay, there's been so many questions coming in that I'm not going to abuse my position and ask any of my own. And I'm going to move to the Q&A, and I'm going to as I said, continue sending them. Please just address them to a specific person. So I'm going to start with a question from Ruth Trusky, who's asking Paul. She says she agrees with the social cohesion approach, but would like to know a little bit more about how these difficult engagements can be initiated and maintained. Paul, if you could give a brief answer to that. Obviously, you know, diverse stakeholders, how do you start these difficult engagements?
It is a difficult question, and in fact, it's probably a science on its own, stakeholder management. But I think it's really about building relationships, building trust, and trying to target people with influence and organizations with influence that have a critical mass following. And I think it's an ongoing process, because one of the challenges in this engagement process is that we need to pull people together from very diverse communities and backgrounds. And I think this is really the challenge, and people have to be open to this type of engagement. And sometimes, you know, people have referred to these things as talk shops, but we must understand that if we're going to reflect on our situation and put meaningful strategies on the table, we have to give it time. We have to think about these things properly. It's no longer good being reactive to the data we have, but we've got to think carefully about how we move forward for the better. So it's taken a year for us to get to a point where the stakeholder cohesion in Makana is quite matured and moving along, driven by the stakeholders themselves and not by us. And that's quite fortunate, but I think it could take longer in some other cases.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, a year seems to be a good time frame from the various case studies I've seen. I'm going to address one more to you that's come through from a few people: Felix, Dube, Elia, KG, a few others. Just to ask you to please comment on the court intervention and the court order to dissolve the municipality. So just a brief comment on what that's about, and also, you know, how you continue to work with the municipality administration through this.
Yeah, I think linked to the previous question as well, you know, one of the challenges in bringing stakeholders and communities together is that there's always going to be some disruptions, and these disruptions generally polarize people, because it's almost like a default position for a lot of people to blame someone for a set of circumstances. But how we view the current matters in Makana is that, you know, democracy has to play itself out. People have the right to go to the courts for relief and to hold government to account, and anything related to democratic process, Kagiso would support. And however, one mustn't see this as the only option. And whilst these court cases take a lot of time and take a lot of money, and sometimes people who need the most help don't have the resources to take it forward, but we need to make sure that the day-to-day work continues. And in Makana, the fortunate thing about the Circle of Unity is on the clusters where the municipality sits, the various directorates sit, and the community sit and the stakeholders sit, there are people from both parties, from the municipality and for those that are litigating. And it's really interesting that all parties have agreed that work should continue while these processes unfold. You know, we've got a war to fight, not only battles here and there. So people are starting to set aside those differences and try and work together for better solutions on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to worrying about the outcomes of the court.
Thanks, Paul. I think you've actually addressed another one where Katie was asking, can we meet all the urgent demands whilst we wait for courts? Just by saying, you know, through your answer, by saying we're not waiting, we do need to continue. We need to be working, especially now during this period. A question for John. So you spoke to the St. Francis example, which obviously showed the claims and the benefits for Santam. But the question is, can you talk to the returns for Santam versus the impacts and returns for communities who then have the democratic right to keep municipalities accountable? You unmute, John, if you just want to unmute.
Sorry, Kathy, I'm
Thank
getting
you.
used to the technology.
No problem.
Very good question. I think one must be very clear that our support to municipality is not driven by the commercial benefit. Commercial benefit is an after effect of the work that we do. So as I indicated, our key pillar that we're driving is to build a resilient society and to close the risk protection gap. So when we do work, when we choose a municipality, we commit for 3 years. So we're saying to the municipality, we have the initiation year where we engage, and Paul will refer to that. There is a deep stakeholder engagement process where you've got to involve the community, with the municipality, business, and so on. And then obviously the second year is a vesting principles and processes that you agree with with those multi-stakeholder forum. And then of course, year 3 is the exit, where we exited to ensure that we exit at a time when we know that the processes are truly embedded and deeply vested and managed by this newly formed cohesive society comprising of business, local business, government, local government, as well as the community. So in terms of the societal rights, they take responsibility because they're part of that compact. They take responsibility for ensuring that certain deliverables that has been agreed to are in fact being delivered. So the municipality is held accountable. There's more open dialogue and communication around issues. And also, even at the end of the 3 years, we do not cut the tie. We keep on checking in after 6 months. How is it going? So the relationship remains, but we try over the 3 years to ensure that the community is empowered together with government to deliver on those things. Case in point is recently we saw that the fires in St. Francis was a result of alien invasive vegetation around St. Francis. And the question was, if this is a driver of the various fires, because there's sometimes people who cause these fires, young ones who may be mischievous and cause these fires and cause enormous damage to community. So the community with the municipality agreed, why don't we create a project where we address the issue of clearing these alien invasives? We sponsored the initiative, and we employed people in the community to do the work. So there was an income generated. They ensure that this project has legs, does in fact benefit both those who have, St. Francis, a beautiful place, holiday place, but also in the informal settlements. So the work was done in both the informal settlement, clearing of alien invasive, as well as that area in St. Francis that we're ensuring that has got high insurance with Santa. So that is how we ensure, Kathy, that the community have got a responsibility together with local municipalities to deliver on projects and initiatives that we are supporting.
Thanks, John. Just given time, I'm going to move quickly on to the next. There's been a few, I've seen 3 or 4 questions asking about nepotism and how you deal with, municipality resource allocation that's going to the connected, the nepotism element in municipalities. There's 3 or 4 questions asking about this political nature and how you're dealing with them. So to start with, I'm going to hand that over to Paul to address. Sorry, you're getting all the tricky court nepotism questions.
Yeah, it's a very difficult subject. This type of thing is about integrity. And so in our process of working with local government, we do want to work with the people in local government and build up and focus on ethical leadership as one of the key focus areas. And so, how receptive are people going to be to that type of capacity building? Well, it depends on the individual and how serious they take that type of skills transfer or training. But at the end of the day, I think if we build greater cohesion between communities, stakeholders, and the municipality, there becomes an organic accountability within those groups of people. And I think that organic accountability is really where the difference may lie. And I think people, it's through those processes that people maybe see value in doing the right thing as opposed to doing the wrong thing. So it's a very difficult question, and I think it's a bit of it's going to take a long time to get this out of the system. But I think some ways municipalities have lost their connectedness to communities, and so the ward committee structures don't necessarily work as well as they should. And in fact, many wards aren't very responsive to their councillors as well in some cases. So we've got to strengthen, and this through the community engagement approach is really about building better connectedness between the politicians, the officials, and communities, where people can have authentic discussion about needs of the community, and the municipality can try and be more people-centric and community-centric and respond to those. And I think as we start dealing with these issues, we might close the gap and have a more transparent process where corruption or nepotism is weeded out in some way.
Thank you, Paul. John, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think Paul is 100% correct. But to create that compact, it needs work. And it's a long process to build trust as well. However, sometimes we can become our own demons, because there's also this notion that municipalities are all corrupt, and it's not true. There are centers of excellence. There are people who really, really want to make the municipality work. We found that in almost all of the municipalities that we've been working on, and like I said, with 53 municipalities, there are truly people who's got their heart in it and who want to deliver something good to their society and communities. So it's not everyone that's rotten apples. There are actually few, only a small number of them. So really it's about building trust, but not to come there high-minded. You know, we normally are the donors and support, provide financial support. We believe that we must co-create solutions instead of being high-minded or coming to the municipality with this view that we know everything. We don't know everything. And it's from that perspective that we've seen a lot of goodwill, a lot of work, hard work taking place, meaningful work that benefits society.
Kathy, I just want to add to that if I can.
Yes, briefly.
I think if we can get to a stage where people who work in municipalities, officials and councillors, can start holding each other accountable. And I think then what John is saying really plays out in a strong way, because the environment's tainted by a few. And if we can get the majority of people to hold those people to account, I think we're going to head a long way. Punitive measures are great, but they will again polarize people and create dysfunction. And so, yeah, that's probably.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to take one more question, which I've seen coming through in a few of the questions before we do our kind of closing statements. I'm going to ask you, John. So a few people have asked, how can Santam or Kagiso support our municipality? People are involved in municipalities in various ways on this forum. They've also been asking, can you fund early childhood development? Can you fund different areas? So I guess if you could just respond by saying how you select the municipalities and what the process is if people are looking for support.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the key things is that that our support is based or links very strong to our core business. It's about risk management. So if you align your support to your core business, you're going to stay the course no matter what. So for us, risk management is an important one. It informs, it speaks directly to our business. That's why we commit for as long as it takes to work towards building resilient societies. And we cannot be experts in every need or domain. And we've made, we realize that. But we're saying there's a place for other partners to come along, because there are specialists or those who in education maybe who can partner with Santam and deal around early childhood development. So it cannot be Santam doing everything, like just as Kagiso chosen human capital development, the same, but together as different sectors, there's a role all of us can play in these different challenges that present in the municipality. So the way we selected municipalities are that we engage with national government and say which municipalities are self-functional. I think one of the key things is to work with a dysfunctional municipality with people who are in acting capacity. Nothing happens because they are not full there, they're not fully committed. So government will then give us a list of municipalities that are self-functioning, not dysfunctional, but functioning, but that need support to get to the next level. That is our first criteria. We overlay that, of course, to say, what is our risk exposure in that area so that we can have this benefit if it comes. In some areas, there's clearly no benefit, but we support those municipalities nevertheless. But I think one of the key areas is the positions must be filled. There mustn't be too many acting positions. The municipality must be functional, and there must be a commitment from both the council to ensure that this memorandum of cooperation will run its course for 3 years. And that is how we've been able to select these municipalities. What's nice now is, well, government has introduced a new model called the district development model, where we don't just look at a district municipality, but we look at a few municipalities around a district, so that the impact, the initiative that we drive impacts not just the 1 or 2 municipalities, but the whole region. And that is how we begin now to have impact, and maybe the spillover could be those municipalities that needs help to the DDM model will now benefit because we're working on that model now that has recently been introduced. I think Ruth Trotsky from TEMDEF, in fact, bringing in those capabilities, that is our thinking now, to bring in more partners so that the impact that we make can really spill over on more than a few municipalities, but that whole region.
Thank you, John. We're almost up with time, so I'm going to, and I know there's a lot more questions. For those of you who haven't raised, we will try to answer them after the webinar by sending through an email or putting them up on the Knowledge Hub. I'm going to ask Paul to close first, just for a minute. Given that our audience is largely corporate social investment practitioners and nonprofits, what advice would you have for those looking to work with local municipalities? Paul, if you can just unmute yourself and close with that. Thanks.
Yeah, Kathy, that's an interesting question, because, you know, working with municipalities to a large extent is about the following procurement processes. And procurement means tendering and working with municipalities. I would think if you are a non-profit and you want to work with municipalities, I suggest you start engaging with municipal managers and mayors and even other members of civil society, and start building up some sort of relationship base within those municipalities. We've, as Kagiso, have grappled with this tender issue for some time. In the case of Makana and this pilot project, we're funding the project, so there was no requirement for a tender. But going forward, I think we're going to sort of look for sort of match funding or co-funding to take these projects forward. But I think I think building the relationships and creating common value for the municipality, for communities, and for the civil society is really important, because when people see the value in what you're doing, I think it does galvanize people towards participating and even contributing to getting the work done, and that's really important. Just on a closing statement, you know, the importance of cohesive civil society and stakeholders in a municipality has really played out during COVID-19. And in Makana, for example, a lot of the food security issues have been driven and dealt with by the Circle of Unity. Communication, media, information, documents, brochures, even research, fundraising, supporting homeless shelters, providing equipment. A lot of it's been supported by the Makana Circle of Unity, and in conjunction with the municipality, because the Makana Circle of Unity is represented on the Joint Operation Committee, which is driving the response to COVID-19. So this has shown the value of when people set aside their differences, socially, economically, racially, religiously, and just get their hands dirty working together. It's amazing how 1 and 1 makes 3, and this exponential impact grows. So I would encourage everybody in all municipalities to sort of set aside these differences and start trying to build relationships and work together, because together amazing things can be created.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for closing on that positive and encouraging note. John, over to you for a closing statement. If you just unmute yourself, please.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, I concur fully with Paul. One of the things that we've learned over the last 10 years is not to take over the function of the municipality. The municipality's officials, they're there to govern. We are a support structure. So it's about co-creating instead of coming with solutions from, as business, thinking that they are more superior. It's really about respecting the current process, the current protocols in municipalities, and working with them as opposed to enforcing solutions that we think may work. So that is what is one of our key learnings. Also, to put in a governance framework with clear responsibilities and deliverables. You know, we've created, with all these municipalities that we're supporting, a project office where we track the key objectives and deliverables, and of course account back to the various structures, whether it is the MACO structure, even all the way up to national office, to say the municipalities that we've agreed to, this is a progress that we're making, these are obstacles we are challenged with, help us to remove these. But with those accountability frameworks in place, with a project plan in place, with respect for the governance process that exists in municipalities, that contributes to a successful partnership and collaboration. And also, of course, bringing on partners that are different from you. I mean, we've learned that even at local level, municipalities, we drive it very hard that they begin to involve even the local business people into the advisory councils, for example, the structure that we've created, where whether it is a small business, community members and so on, so that they have access to engage and put everything on the table. And that compact helps normally to have a sustainable structure for municipalities to move forward.
Thank you, John. And there was a couple of questions around sharing some of those frameworks and best practice guidelines. I know on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub, we do have the Santam case study, and we'll see what additional information we can put up and send out to participants on that. So again, I'd just like to thank Paul and John. I think you've really provided some great case studies here of how to support municipalities and different approaches that have been taken, with Kagiso focusing in depth on the one, and Santam working across 53 on one particular area. But there's been some great learnings that you've shared. Just a reminder to everyone that all of this will be on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub after the session. I'd just like to not only thank our panelists, to thank Kagiso Trust again for funding this topic on our Knowledge Hub, but also to thank all of you that have participated. Thank you for attending the webinar. Thank you for taking the polls and sending in all the questions. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned in the beginning, we'd also appreciate it if you could complete the survey when the webinar is over. We'd love your feedback. And then, yeah, I've mentioned the Knowledge Hub a couple of times. All the information will be there. The Trialogue Business and Society completely virtual conference, 13th and 14th of October. Diarize that date. And then this year's Trialogue Business and Society Handbook. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'm going to close this now, and we will be sending a link to everyone with the a link to the slides and this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Paul.